Hello. Thank you from me as well, especially to you, Al, for flying all the way from Lagos just to talk to us. It's really great. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna just give like 2 quick introductions to El and Bisi, and then afterwards I give the word to Bisi and we start off with a conversation. So although most of you probably know El Anatsui's work, I'm just gonna quickly say that he was born in 1944 in Ghana and has then moved to Nigeria, where he has been teaching at the University of Nsukka until 2009. He has exhibited his work extensively, first really internationally acclaimed at the Venice Biennial, especially in 2007 with a huge work. His artworks are in the collections of big museums like the Museum of Modern Art in New York or the Metropolitan Museum or the British Museum, and he has exhibited extensively in major museums all over the world. And Bisi Silva is, as already mentioned, the director of the CCA in Lagos, but she's also an independent curator, and she has curated numerous exhibitions, international exhibitions, in spaces like the Thessaloniki Biennale, or she was co-curator of the Dakar Biennial as well. And just recently, she's done a big exhibition with Anatsui's work at CCA in Lagos. And so I think it's a really good starting point to go from there and then maybe go a little bit back and talk about his work.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Yvette. You can hear me? Can everybody hear? Good. Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, thank you to Art Basel and Contemporary Ant for inviting us to this platform. I'm really excited to be talking with Anatsui, whose work I've been following for over 20 years, I think. I think I first went to his solo show in around 1995, so nearly 20 years. And I think for me, this conversation today about artist and curator is quite interesting, especially when I think about where we're both located, in Nigeria, in West Africa, but also the fact that we work not only in Africa, but also in Europe, principally Europe, America, and other parts of the world. And the sort of dichotomy that brings, going from one context in which there's very little infrastructure into another context in which you have all the infrastructures. But what I'd like to do today is start with El's work and development and career, working with curators mainly based outside of Africa, because this also introduces us to the works that many of us are familiar with, of which we have an image here, the monumental metal bottle top hanging pieces. A lot of you will remember it from the Venice Biennale in 2007, which was a very important outing for him. So what I'd like to do is sort of start by asking you, El, I'd like to go back even a little bit further to what I see as one of the important milestones in your career, but also in the visibility of your work on a truly international scale. And that's the exhibition, Gawu, that started in the UK, curated by Martin Barlow at the Oriel Museum in Wales. Could you talk to us a little bit about how, what I would say is the, small exhibition became a 10-venue touring exhibition that went to 5 venues in the United Kingdom and to, I think, 5 other venues across the United States, and in a way triggered this sort of global interest in your work. Could you talk a little bit about how that came about, how you worked with Martin Barlow, and thinking back how you sort of experienced what would be the longest touring exhibition that you've ever had?
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll start by saying how I met Martin Barlow. We had a workshop in Wales, I think 10 artist workshop or so, and he came at the end of this thing when we had our shows, and he took particular interest in my work, and then introduced himself to me, and then invited me to his gallery, the Oriel Mostin, in Llandudno, Wales, to come and see the space and see whether we could work on an exhibition. Later on, he came to me in my studio in Nigeria and spent a couple of days and looked around and saw what I was doing, and we decided that, well, we were going to click together. And so the idea started of the show. And well, I also went to look at this space. And so I kind of started thinking about how to effectively engage that space. And then saw that it resulted in really monumental, because I've worked with bottle caps for some time before this time, but seeing his space, it inspired, something in me that wanted me to work with the monumental. The monumental is something that the bottle cap pieces that I now work with lend themselves very easily to, but I haven't had the opportunity of really showing them on that scale until he showed me his space, and I thought that was a good invitation to now show the potential of this medium. And so the exhibition started. It was originally planned only for his space, but after the opening and interest by other venues, we decided, okay, it should travel a little bit. And the little bit became like 5 venues in the UK, and after the UK, we saw that venues in the US were also interested in it, so we had to travel it to the US, for another 5 venue show, and the venues kept asking and asking, and we had to stop it at a point because I thought that there was need to rest and think about something new. So without our having to stop it, it would have gone on until now. Yeah, I think the intervention of the curator, the curator of the Oriel Mostin, was such that he did not come into my space. He didn't infringe into my space. He gave me the respect and allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do with the ideas that I had in mind. Being that I've been to his space, I knew what to do to engage that space.
Can I just ask, you went to the space to develop your idea. Did the curator come to your space, to your studio space? And if he didn't, I wonder how that impacts on or not the kind of work that you end up presenting.
Yeah, most of the times for an exhibition of this nature, you have to necessarily go to the space to relate to it, study it, and feel it, and see how it communicates to you, if it communicates anything to you, if it doesn't, then you have to think about what you can ask it to communicate, and so on. So in respect of this space, as I've already mentioned, I thought it asked me to, do something that, this is a very huge space, and you have to do something which does not obliterate the space, but which kind of works with the space as well. It kind of, goes alongside the space,
And you didn't answer the second part. Did Martin visit your studio space?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I said he visited.
Oh, okay.
He came and spent about 2 days with me.
What I'd like to also know is, in working principally abroad, how do you navigate, how do you balance, your artistic engagement, your artistic practice with where you work, which is Nigeria, and Africa, Ghana as well, where you're from, and the fact that most of your work is actually shown outside of where you live, where you create the work. How do you balance the way in which, one, you create the work, two, the way in which the work is received, and maybe three, the way in which you work with the curators to understand and to present the work? I hope that isn't too many questions.
Well, I don't think that the problem of distance is any longer a problem. Whether you're there in a place or not, you still can experience a bit of it. And even you can physically travel to places to see, like I've done in so many, for many of the projects that I've done outside of Africa, and so that's not a problem at all. Yeah.
Yvette would like to bring you in at this stage. Yvette.
Yeah, so actually I would like to go back a little bit, if that's okay. So, because we know your bottle cap works, and that's like what you became famous with. But as I earlier mentioned, that you moved to Nigeria in 1975. You've been a teacher at the University of Nsukka for quite a while, and I think Nsukka is a very specific place because it became famous for artistic practice on artistic group called the Nsukka group, which was important in that way that as young art students, African art students, you were trying to find ways how to actually interweave traditional artistic practices with academic Western practices and kind of develop something new out of it. And I think it's quite relevant also to your practice. So basically that's a question how this has translated and has been kind of maybe a thread through your artistic practice until today, because still today with your bottle cap works, it's always the question of the combination, how you integrate, for example, kente or other traditional patterns with aspects of consumption and the modern world. And so, it would be interesting maybe if you could go into that a little bit.
Well, you talk about my association with the Nsukka group.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, long before I came to Nigeria, I had associated with other artists in my home country, Ghana, and we would have groups which were very loose and just for exhibition purposes, You gave each other the challenge of having to get something ready for an exhibition, that way of moving the adrenaline, in you, so every year at least once, for once, you know that you have to have your adrenals going and producing at least a work for an exhibition, so that even if you are so lazy, you, you had a chance to do something for a show. That way you keep going, because believe that if you are in a profession and you are not practicing, then you certainly have to die off, and that was a way of getting ourselves up and doing, in the hope that we would stay alive and continue practicing. So when I came to Nigeria, I certainly was with a group, and a group of artists who we met and selected, each other, on the basis of people who were busy at work, in order to see how the synergy, was going to move us. Yeah, so is there any portion of the question?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just a little bit in terms of what the theory behind it was, like this idea of the natural synthesis, saying that you actually combine traditional practices with your own practices, or with practices that you learned during your academic studies. I mean, maybe you could say a little bit about this, because I feel like it's something that is still somehow reflected in your work.
Well, those are not things that I want to talk about much, because I think they've been over-labored, and the idea of natural synthesis or combining Western things that you garnered from the Western type of education that you were exposed to, and all, these are all, I think they should be things that we forget about now and talk about other things, Yeah, it's true that I went to that art schools in Africa started as offshoots of mostly existing art institutions in the West, But I think that's long ago. We have passed through that stage and are now in a completely new stage, whereby we are in charge of almost everything. For instance, my school. The school I went to, the University of Science and Technology College of Art, was affiliated to the Goldsmith College. And we had curriculum which was more Western, or more British than Ghanaian. And I remember that we didn't have much exposure to art culture of our own location. And it was about the end of my art school that I discovered that there was something missing. You don't go to school and learn about Western art only. Didn't art exist other parts of the world apart from the West? And so it set me and some other artists on a search for what our own art culture is. And that, has led to discoveries that I think impacted on our practices, And I think it made us richer in the sense that we know about our own and know about Europe, We know about the West and Africa as against,
I want to sort of just come back again to your relationship and your working, your professional relationships with curators. I think that it's important, especially over the last 15 years. After Gao, which taught from 2004 to 2008, You were invited to the Venice Biennale by Robert Storr in 2007, where I would say this was another extremely important outing for you. You presented actually two major projects in Venice. The first one were the two humongous pieces, of which this is one, at the Arsenale, invited by Robert Storr. And you also you took part in the widely acclaimed exhibition Art Tempo, When Time Becomes Art, which was at the Palazzo Fortuny, where you hung one of your pieces, the facade of a palazzo. Could you talk about the preparation, the organization, the invitation for these two extremely important periods in your life? And I would say that working with these two curators, the second one was Axel Vordit, is it? Vervoort. And Robert Storr, who are major curators. Can you talk about that experience a little bit more and how those two experiences have impacted on your work and its reception on a global scale?
Okay, Robert Storr invited me to the Venice Biennale for 2007. I think a year before. Well, that wasn't my first time in the Venice Biennale. I was there in 1990, and but that was at very, very short notice. We had about two months or so to get works ready for the Biennale because the invitation came very late, and so we had to, hash up some things and present. But this time, I had more than a year, of preparation, and so I had to visit the venue. I had gotten the invitation from Axel Vervoort also to take part in his exhibition at Tempo. So with those two projects in Venice, I thought there was need to visit Venice. So I went there and spent a couple of days to kind of take in the spaces and see what I could do with them. Axel was rather straightforward. He said, engage with the front of the facade of the building. So when I went there, I spent all the time outside studying this thing. I think I spent about a day over there studying the movement of the sun and light and, in the frontage of the space, and also the elements, like the wind and all those things, which wasn't, it's a fairly well-protected space, so I saw that wind wasn't much of a problem, and therefore I agreed, okay, my bottle cap pieces could safely hang there without any problem, Now, the building, the Palazzo Fortuny, is a very old 12th century building, which I think it houses some museum as well. And so I had to eventually go into the museum to see what the inside has, because I wanted to relate the inside and the outside contents of the building to each other. And guided by the information I collected and also the theme of the exhibition, a theme which was very attractive to me because I've been somebody who's believed in the efficacy of time as a shaper of things, and so I did this work in which I thought about time times function as something which fades things, fades memories, fades objects, fades colors, and fades things. So I worked with this idea and created this work, which had to undergo final intervention when it was up on the building. You know, when the work came and was being mounted, I spent some time with them. We went to the Venice Biennale and came back. They had finished mounting, and I saw that it didn't quite work well with the location, because it was like an imposition on the building, you know, and I had to immediately intervene, and the intervention was a way of creating tiers in the work, you know, which allowed the 12th century building to kind of integrate with the piece which I did, you know, in a way of emphasizing the idea of time, you know. Now, with the Venice Biennale piece, I didn't have much interaction physically with Robert Storr beyond his inviting me. But when he sent me the eventual space, when he indicated to me the space, and then they sent me drawings, and I visited, and I saw that I was given 2 walls that faced each other, I decided immediately to create works which would be in conversation with each other. You know, and that kind of enabled me to understand a little bit of the media that I was working with, the bottle caps. You know, I saw that all along I've been working with it, but hadn't thought about it as having male and female components. And it was that necessity to create something things which would be related, be in conversation with each other, or be binaries, you know, that enabled me to now concentrate on these 2 different elements of the bottle caps and create these 2 works. One I call the male, and then the other one the female one, you know. And even in the display, you know, I made sure that the male one was the one that you saw first. And when you saw it, naturally it draws you close. And when you get close, you necessarily have to go back again. And when you turn, then you'll see the female one. I was born into the Christian, the tradition or religion, the Christian religion, and well, I have come away with some of the tenets of it, you know, the creation story and all these things, and the idea that man was the first created, and then after that, the female, you know, that idea was at play over there too, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you, just before I want to go back a little bit as well and follow up on what Yvette said. But before I do so, I'd like to touch on the exhibition Who Knows Tomorrow that was in Berlin in 2010. And for that exhibition, you're working with a Nigerian art historian and curator, Chika Okeke Agulu, but also somebody who was a student at your university, but also a colleague, because he was a lecturer at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship between yourself and Chika for that particular exhibition? How did you develop the work for that? What were the interactions between you and the curator, if there were that much interaction? How was it different, maybe, from working with Martin or Robert Storr? Because this is somebody who you know, somebody who I believe you're a mentor to. There must have been, and somebody who knows you from, the context from which you work. I mean, I think that is something very special, quite unique as well, because it's difficult to really mention the number of African curators that you would have worked with, unless there's somebody that I'm missing out that you've worked with you'd like to mention.
Yeah, I think, he did mention that Chika is somebody who knows me. He's been at Nsukka. So he didn't need to visit Nsukka or visit me. The invitation came. He selected me to participate in the show, and I requested that I have to see the space. And then I think the idea grew from that point, of trying to relate a work to a space, and this is the old National Gallery in Berlin. I visited, and the things that that struck me and which I wanted to play around with was the idea that where I was to exhibit was also in the open and not on the wall. It's away from the wall, and I noticed that there was very strong gusts of wind, in that area. So I decided to work with the idea of, the elements, the wind, wind moving things, and, and that was a very important aspect of this thing which went into that work. The work I created, Ozone Layer, also was to relate to. The old National Gallery is something that is talking about days that nations have to concern themselves about identity, and such things, and kind of closed in. But now we live in a world where we have problems which require that we work together, and not as nations only, but as humankind trying to protect our environment. So the idea of the wind there, and then the idea of the ozone layer and climate change and all those things came into my development of the work for that space.
Can I just ask, even when you see the space, what kinds of conversations or interactions do you have with the curator before you both settle on a final decision? I'm sort of trying to get a little bit more of an idea of how you work with the curators, because these are major exhibitions. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Was there a back and forth with Chika?
No, there wasn't a back and forth with Chika. The most important thing, I think, is that a curator believes in the capacity of an artist to engage this thing. And so I think in most of the projects that I've been invited for, that kind of respect, was there. And so there wasn't any need for any back and forth, They respected my, capacity to maybe take on the challenge and maybe effectively deal with it, So there wasn't any back and forth between, yeah.
Yvette, do you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe just kind of going a bit further with that, because when I heard other talks, interviews with you, or documentations that would film you, like in the Brooklyn Museum while you were preparing the shows. It was very much about this idea for you also to let the curators and people working with you make suggestions actually how to hang the works and how to move them, and so you were like very open to the ideas. So it seemed like that you didn't have like a totally fixed image of how the work in the end should look like in the space. And I think that's quite interesting because that's not necessarily something that an artist would do. So it is kind of really participatory in a way. So maybe you could talk about this, whether you see that as a like participatory act, or maybe just go a bit deeper into that.
Well, I think for all artists, there is that element, but the difference maybe is that I allow more freedom, If you're hanging a Gerhard Richter work, you have to think about certain things, It's not just a matter of hanging it anyway. You have to think about what space it hangs in best, and at what height, or, or what side of the building, of the space. And that I allow people more freedom is because, I believe that all human beings are creative animals, and in all of us have creativity in us, but in most of us it is asleep, and the fact of giving people this challenge might be able to waken the artist in them. That is one of them. And then the other one is that certainly these are free, my works with the bottle caps in particular, and not only that, with the previous ones that I've done, like the wood slabs and even the ceramics, leave a lot to whoever is installing them to kind of contribute something, and I've seen very interesting contributions that people have made, contributions that I think I wouldn't be able to make myself. So in a way, that enables me draw upon the vast human resources that we have, the human creativity that abounds, and also the fact that these works are free means that I cannot go everywhere to install them. So people certainly have to be doing them.
Can we go to the next image, please? And just so that we're going to open up soon to the public. But I do want to talk from my position as a curator that works in Africa, that works in Lagos, Nigeria, and who recently organized an exhibition of work by Anatsui. Now, for me, this was a challenge because for many months I was thinking, how do you show the work of, such an artist in a small space with little or no budget, and to have the full impact of his knowledge and his practice over the last 40 years. As a lot of you will know, he celebrated his 70th birthday this year, and we wanted to do something to commemorate that. So in March of this year, we organized an exhibition called Playing with Chance. And after many months of thinking about it, I finally thought, we don't have the space to show his monumental sculptures. We don't have the money to insure even one of his wall hangings. And we don't have the security guards to look after it. So what does a curator in my position do with an artist in his position? And that sort of goes back to the question about, how we negotiate the way in which we work in our own context, but also, in other contexts. And I call this exhibition now, which finished, I think it finished at the end of April, beginning of May. I call this exhibition the cheapest exhibition of the most expensive artist in Africa. We salvaged crates that were supposed to ship works out and use them as support. But what I actually did was to visit his studio, his library, and his office in Nsukka, and collect different materials from these three spaces. Could you show the next image, please? Okay, so this just gives you two views of the exhibition at the Center for Contemporary Art, Lagos. We showed some of his earliest works, his woodworks, which are not well known in the West, but these are works that he started with in the 70s after graduating from the university in Ghana. And I think what's important was that it shows the trajectory that actually leads to the bottle tops that we all know so well. We had his sketches, his sketchbooks. We had bits and bobs from his studio. We had videos, slides, leaflets, reviews. It's almost like it is an archival exhibition. To the left-hand side of the image, we had over 200 letters that were written by him and to him over a 20, 30-year period. And I'd like to say that in 7 years of the Center for Contemporary Art, this was probably the most visited exhibition that we've ever organized. I think that, in view of, this conversation, the artist and the curator, there is a situation where sometimes it's difficult for spaces and curators based on the continent to actually work with artists who are working at a very monumental scale. One, the budget isn't there, the spaces may not be there. So I'd like to maybe reflect very briefly with Anatsui on this exhibition, which, I know I have some images of him looking at the exhibition as if he's seen some of the works for the first time. We even had his pay slips. Every single pay slip that he received from 1975 till he retired in 2011. We took a pay slip a year just to highlight his 31 or 36 years of 36 years as a university lecturer. We also invited 3 students who he has mentored closely to be part of the exhibition, because a very important part of his artistic practice and of his life is the fact that he is a teacher, a lecturer. He's somebody who communicates, through engaging with new generations of artists that are coming up in Africa. And I think this is an aspect that sometimes isn't discussed enough. 5 minutes. So, Elle, do you want to just, quickly respond to, this exhibition, which is unlike all the other exhibitions that I've seen of your work?
Yeah, I think you are right. It's unlike any of the exhibitions or of the projects that I've taken part in, because this is the first time that a curator came not asking me to do any work, but now picking things that he or she thinks go to make a project, and it was very interesting. I initially didn't quite feel comfortable with with your idea when you came picking things, but when I eventually came to see the show, I saw that there are great potentials. I think it has great potentials which, could be explored further. It's a show about, more like a retrospective, but not about art, but about other aspects of life. Well, most of them have to do with art anyway. I don't do anything but art, so so eventually they all have to do about art. But then aspects of the art which people haven't known or seen, and which I haven't given attention to myself to until I saw them on exhibition. When you exhibit something, they are highlighted, and therefore even the one who it is about gets to discover new things about it. Yeah, from this exhibition, I have ideas that I think I'm going to discuss with you later on that, that are worth exploring,
Thank you. So we'd just like to open up for 5 minutes if there's any question. Over there. Yeah, there.
Oh, yeah. Hi, my name is Sanam Aquajet, and I'm a good friend of Bisi and Els. So I'm going to jump into a conversation we started last night at dinner. We were talking about a need of better and more complicated responses to building art history from the African continent. And I was wondering, Elle, as a teacher and as a mentor, and I know that a lot of your students are starting to make a name for themselves, like Nene Okere, Bisi as a curator. Looking at art history from Africa, knowing that there are 54 countries and that really generalizations, unless it's in the context of talking about Pan-Africanism, are dangerous and reductive, what sort of questions do you think people should be asking? Where would you point art historians and curators looking for new, narratives to start investigating in art coming from Africa, locally at the national scale and sort of continentally at the moment? What sort of new ideas, exciting ideas are coming up that we should be thinking about? From Nigeria, I would say that last week I was reading the MA thesis of an artist from Nsukka. It was actually sent to me by Janet Stanley from the Smithsonian Institute. And it was interesting because it was a thesis on photography, the history of photography in Nigeria, focusing on the work of two studio photographers based in Enugu, not far from Nsukka. And I was very curious about that because I have yet to come across texts or research that has been done on the continent by artists or writers living there. And I think that one of the areas, at least that I will be looking at, will be the archive of many universities who receive the theses of their students, in which a lot of knowledge is actually encapsulated within these theses, which are not being discussed on open platform, whether within the country, whether outside of the country. And I think in order to be able to build a local art history, we need to go into these archives, just as I have gone into Anatsui's archive and tried to highlight aspects of his work which has been forgotten, and as he said, by himself, but also by the many curators that have worked with him over the last decade or two. What are the issues that are being discussed in some of these theses? I haven't, read a lot yet, but I think that, it's something that we should be looking at and extracting from that the issues that are important to the local audience.
I don't think I had a good question. I have hearing challenges. So if you are not...
Okay, so he didn't hear the question due to hearing challenges. She wanted to... You wanted to know how we can begin to develop art history discourse in Nigeria that's local.
And also, I was going to ask, what does Elle think? What sort of areas and ideas does Elle think we should start looking at as we start to develop a more sophisticated art historical discourse that's appropriate to what's being made right now?
You know, what areas we should be thinking about as we develop new discourses in art history on the continent. Do you have any ideas?
Well, that's a very difficult this thing. I have ideas, all right, but I don't know.
What's missing?
Yeah, what's missing is the fact that of maybe the comparative. We've all along been doing, even now, a large chunk of art historical discourse is based on Western, paradigms or models, and we certainly have our own. We should have our own paradigms or this thing that we can add to this. You know, it will make us richer if we also develop our own this thing, combine it with this, and then have something new happening. Just like my experience in art school, which I mentioned earlier on, a large chunk of this thing, a large chunk of knowledge about art or art practice tends to be based on not models from the continent or local models, but foreign models,
Thank you. I think we have to end here now. So maybe if there are more questions, we can continue with a drink outside or something. So thanks again so much, Anatsui and Bisi Silva, for coming here today. And yes, have a great afternoon. Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks.